And welcome to the Seahawks360 podcast, a sports ethos production. I'm your host, Candace Higgins, and as always, it's a pleasure and it's a privilege to talk Hawks with you guys. Your Seattle Seahawks fell in defeat and are now officially 2-3, losing to the New Orleans Saints in what was another shootout, 39-32. Seahawks lose. But despite that loss, there are a lot of interesting talking points coming out of that game. Most notably, again, Geno Smith, who put on a show and had an impressive 268-yard game with 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. With a 139 passer rating, he was incredible. And honestly, there were a lot of opportunities left on the table that were beyond his control. DK Metcalf dropped a perfect touchdown pass. There was also a fumble by DK Metcalf on an opportunity. Now, I think that fumble was iffy. We'll talk about that. But yet they called it a fumble, so it was a turnover. But there were a lot of opportunities left on the field still. The score could have been even higher. The Saints were basically given, I tell you, a touchdown because of a almost inexplicable Michael Dixon play where he tries to rugby punt it, I think was the initial concept, and he decides to run for it. It basically gets fumbled, and they essentially give the ball and give a touchdown to the Saints. They spotted them 7 points, and unfortunately that's what ended up being the margin of the game. There were a lot of things that could have went differently for the Seahawks. They definitely didn't have any momentum going their way. A lot of people come away talking about the referees. There were several, in my opinion, questionable calls that went against the Seahawks. I think there could be a legitimate argument made that the referees interfered with the game, given the magnitude and the momentum that those calls ultimately gave the Saints and took away from the Seahawks consistently. Like, it wasn't even just calls were going against the Seahawks. It was just momentum plays. And so when it's momentum plays at key moments like that consistently throughout the game, you do have to question it. Tariq Woolen was given, it had a penalty on him that I think was questionable. Damian Lewis, no, actually, I think it was Charles Cross that was given another penalty, and that seemed very weak. It was a holding call that I do not believe was a true holding call. So just a lot of things went against the Seahawks, but like I said, it was an interesting game. Defense was atrocious again. We can talk a little bit about that, but I think that it's been talked about enough. At this point, there just needs to be some changes made on the defense. Defense looked bad, with the exception of Tariq Woolen, yet again. But the question and the thing that I want to talk most about today is the quarterback position, because Geno's play has put the Seahawks at an interesting position. When the season started, it was assumed that the number one need for the Seattle Seahawks would be quarterback. Because Geno Smith is on a 1-year deal, he was widely viewed as a stopgap at best, but probably the league's worst quarterback at worst. A lot of people thought that Drew Lock would start eventually, that Geno wouldn't even get a lot of opportunity to play. He wouldn't play well at all. And Geno has just repeatedly, week after week after week, stacked up not just good performances, but elite performances. So let's talk about it. The question that I have and that I want to emphasize the most in today's episode is, should the Seattle Seahawks still draft a quarterback? It is the buzzing question throughout Seahawks fandom and, to some extent, the league in general. So let's get into it and talk some Hawks. So I touched on the game a little bit. I really don't plan to talk that much about the game. There's not a whole lot to say, I don't think. Or maybe there is, but I'm just not going to emphasize that in this episode, because there's a much more interesting topic of conversation, like I mentioned, and that is, should the Seahawks still draft a quarterback? Right now, Geno Smith is ranked number 1 over a Patrick Mahomes, over a Josh Allen. Number 1 in PFF ranking at 90.2. He is also ranked third in yards per attempt at 8.3 yards per attempt. He's number one in completion percentage for those who have over a minimum of 20 attempts. 75.2% there. He's ranked number one in passer rating at 113.2. I mind you, Patrick Mahomes' passer rating right now is 110.5. And like everybody expected, your Seattle Seahawks are ranked the number one offense in the NFL using DVOA or measured by DVOA. And for those of you who may not know, DVOA stands for Defensive Adjusted Volume over Average. And essentially what they do is it ranks offenses, but it accounts for some things that just general statistics don't. So quarter scrambles are counted as passing plays instead of rushing plays. There's an account for if somebody is playing indoors, so indoor plays taken into account, as well as strength of schedule to some extent. So a lot of factors go into it, but it is probably one of your best, most accurate assessments of offensive efficiency that exists in the NFL. And the Seattle Seahawks rank number one in large part, in no small part, because of Geno Smith. Right now, statistically, he is a clear top 5 quarterback in this league. And I don't think a lot of people, or really anybody, including myself, who was a Geno optimist. I was a Geno advocate. I said that he would play well. I said he would outdo or outlive everybody's expectations, but that's just because everybody's expectations were so low that I did think he would be able to do a better job than people thought that he would. He's outsurpassed even what I could have imagined. And so because he's playing like a franchise quarterback, at least through the first 5 weeks, and it has yet to be, to be told if he can keep this up throughout the remainder of the season. But assuming he can, because there are a lot of really sustainable things about Geno's game that I think can carry over game to game. His accuracy, that doesn't seem to be going away. It seems to be very sustainable. But his control and his command of the line of scrimmage, getting the Seahawks in and out of plays, and his ability to read defenses properly doesn't seem to go away, just because that's just the depth of his knowledge. I don't see a real reason why he should have a tremendous dip. It's not anything obvious. Now, of course, no team has been able to truly expose his weaknesses, and Geno does have them. He does have a ceiling, and so we'll see as the season progresses what he looks like against a Bucs defense and things like that. But if he continues his play, the Seahawks then have found themselves a franchise quarterback who they don't have under contract through next year. And so the question is, what do you do with that? A lot of people have been arguing that because Geno has been playing so well, the draft focus needs to shift from quarterback to defense in the first round with their first 2 first-round picks. That's what a lot of people are talking about. And in fact, a lot of mock drafts are mocking that the Seahawks will select 2 defensive players in the first round and not a quarterback. Some do, assume that they'll get a quarterback steal. But if you look at the recent ones, not really. The consensus is the Seahawks have found their quarterback. But I want to question if that's a foregone conclusion. Because as I mentioned, Geno is not under contract next year. And I think a lot of people assume that the Seahawks will easily be able to reattain and re-sign Geno Smith. I think that's the wrong assumption. In fact, I have legitimate serious questions about the Seahawks' ability to retain Geno if he keeps up this form of play. I think he's going to price himself right out of what the Seahawks can do. A lot of people think that Geno can get a $15, $20 million deal. Well, if you think that, let's go over some numbers. Let's talk through some scenarios. Here are real contracts that happened. There aren't a lot of situations historically that have been anything close to what Geno has been or will be if he's able to sustain this level of play. But here are a couple close examples. Jameis Winston, who was a starter for the Bucs for years. He did a backup quarterback job for some time, sitting behind Sean Payton and Drew Brees, learning more about offenses and decision making, which was his biggest downfall. And then he came out in 2021 and he started for about 7 games and he was playing well. His completion percentage ended up being about 58%. He had 14 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, a passer rating of 102, and he averaged 7.5 yards per attempt. It's pretty good stuff. It's not as good right now. It projects to be around where his completion percentage is lower, but a lot of his other stats match up to where by the end of the year Geno will be. But this is 7 games, right? And so Geno has really almost outsurpassed this in his 7 games alone. Well, Jameis Winston got injured. Major injury. ACL took him out. But despite the ACL injury and only having 7 games of competent play, Jameis Winston was able to ascertain a 2-year, $28 million extension on 7 games and a major injury. You know how many question marks people have or players have coming off an ACL injury, and that still got him $14 million. So for people thinking you can get Geno Smith for this level of play for anything between 15 to 20 million, I think we can safely throw that out of the box because Jameis didn't even play as well as Geno's playing right now. And assuming Geno can stay healthy, he would have been able to sustain that over a whole year. There are questions about when they signed Jameis, will he be able to, would he be able to sustain that? Would he have fallen off of a cliff at some point throughout the year? Well, they didn't know, but they signed him the $28 million anyway. Which means I think the bare minimum that you can expect to get Geno for is around $20 million. That's the bare minimum. But I don't think that's really going to be what Geno will end up going for. Here's another similar situation, a Ryan Tannehill sort of situation, if you will, where Ryan Tannehill was awful in Miami. And even though he had the opportunity to start, he was just bad. But he had a huge breakout year in 2019. In 2019, Ryan Tannehill had a 70% completion rate, which is more along the lines, still lower than Geno, but more along the lines of where he is. He had 22 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 9.6 yards per attempt, and a 117 passer rating. Now that's more in line with where Geno is. That's more comparable, and he was able to sustain that over a whole year. Well, guess what? That got him a 4-year, $118 million deal. And that was a few years ago. So imagine with the cap going up, that kind of year, 1 year, was able to secure him a 4-year deal. A lot of people are saying get Geno for a year, maybe 2, no more than 3. But does Geno really want to settle for less than a 4-year deal? Will he have to settle for less than a 4-year deal with that level of play? Ryan Tannehill was 31. Geno's 32. There's not a huge difference in age there. It's not like Tannehill had a ton of upside at the time. But yet he's still got massive money. Relative to the QB rankings, it's not massive money. But if you're talking about the Seahawks, that's a lot of money to give out. That's a big commitment to make. And while Tannehill was able to sustain similar play, even actually in some ways better play in 2020, these past 2 years has really seen him fall back to the mean. He's regressed to the mean, Tannehill. And I have questions about if the same thing will happen with Geno. You sign into 4 years. Does he really sustain that play? Does he really live up to that contract? Does he make that look like a great contract? I'm not sure about that. In fact, I question it. As great as Geno has played, I don't know if he'll ever sustain that over a period of 4 years. I think you see slight regression back to the mean because, like Ryan Tannehill, there's not upside there. There's not. And I would argue that Geno does have a better arm than Tannehill probably ever had. But when it comes to interceptions and things like that, in those big moments, in those really big moments when you're in the playoffs and teams are scheming to take away your strengths, to make you play towards your weaknesses, will Geno really be able to do that? I think there's a ceiling on that. I think he might even be able to take the Seahawks further than Russell Wilson did in the playoffs. That's not saying much, but I think he could get the Seahawks to an NFC championship perhaps if the defense were, even halfway good, mediocre. But I just don't know if he can get you to a Super Bowl. And it is a valuable question about if the Seahawks should really pretty much put all of their resources into Geno, because that's what that would be doing. The Seahawks have less cap space than people think because they've already re-signed Quandre Diggs, Jamal Adams, those contracts, Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, those contracts, Uchenna Nwosu, Shelby Harris, those contracts. They already have players they're paying big money to. The Seahawks have $32 million in effective cap space. Well, for those who say let's just franchise Geno Smith, you want to guess what the franchise tag would be for a quarterback? $31.5 million. So you would effectively be killing all cap space. Like, I'm not even sure you'd have enough money to pay. You wouldn't have enough money to pay the draft picks by franchise tagging Geno Smith. People say draft a quarterback, franchise tag Geno. Oh, well, fine and good. Now, there are things the Seahawks could do to mitigate their cap space a little bit, make some room to be able to pay Geno and the draft picks, but that will be it. There'd be no other moves. And this team is still really early in the rebuild. There's still a lot of holes that need to be filled. I don't think that's the way to go. So you rule out the cap space option. We've ruled that out effectively. We've ruled out the option in terms of him being able to take anything less than 20 million, because that's not happening. To me, that leaves a couple of options. They could extend him now, not knowing if he'll be able to sustain this level of play. I think if they did that now, they may be able to get him for around, I'll say $25 million. Because if the franchise tag is 30.1, sorry, not 30.1, 31.5, if that's the franchise tag, you might be able to get him for a little less over an extended period of time. Maybe you might be able to get him for like 2 years, maybe 3. He might agree to that. It's more long-term money. It's more money than he's seen in a long time. And he already knows he can excel in this offense. That will only get you so far, though. In terms of that, there's a chance Geno can decide that he wants to bet on himself, because in the free market, the Ryan Tannehill deal was worth $29.5 million per year. If you didn't want to do the math on that, that's $30 million per year. Like I said, that was a few years ago, and the cap is expected to go up. I think you'd be very lucky, and Geno would be doing the Seahawks a major favor if you were able to ascertain him again for anything less than $30 million. I mean, I know $20 million is the floor, right? But I think he'd have to regress in order to be worth 20. Why would he accept 20 when Ryan Tannehill is getting 30? Right? That's in line. Like, that pretty much makes that the floor for him, given that I think he's playing better than Ryan Tannehill played in 2019 in a lot of metrics. Are you willing to pay Geno Smith $30 million? I don't think that I am. And I am a huge, huge, huge Geno advocate. I am. Please don't mistake me. You all, if you listen to this podcast from the beginning, you know I advocated for Geno. Felt like Pete was leaning in that direction. And I felt like Pete was making the right decision all along by picking Geno over Locke. I believed he could do far better than people ever thought he could do. But I also know that there is a ceiling on Geno. And this is year one of a rebuild. To pay Geno Smith this money, knowing how bad the defense is and how many holes need to be filled, not only does it basically put you in win now mode right over again after basically spending a year in rebuild, it's a shortcut. It's a shortcut to pay Geno. It just gets you back to winning games now, regular season wins now. But the goal is a Super Bowl. And I'm not confident that Geno can get this team to the Super Bowl and win one. I think it'd be a fluke if he could even get you there. As much as I respect everything Geno Smith has done, there's a ceiling there that I believe still exists. I think if this is the playoffs, Geno wouldn't look as good. He just wouldn't, especially with the whole year of tape out on him and what he does well. The NFL catches up, and I don't think it'll be worth it to take almost all of your effective cap space and spend it at one position. The Seahawks have too many holes. Now, if this roster was more balanced, perhaps that's a whole different conversation. It really is. If this defense was everything that people hoped it would be and it was at least ranked, people 15th, top 20 at least, and then you could get a few draft picks in and just help, build it back up. If it was that simple, great. But they're one of the worst in the league. They're not the worst in some metrics. But if you do the eye test, and if you look at the situations where the offenses that they've played has, key missing players and so forth, I think that puts them as the worst. Statistically, they're not right now. The Lions are. But, again, this team has too many holes, I think, to put those kind of resources in one position and essentially say, Geno's going to take us over the top, even with a terrible defense. We've already seen he can't overcome that. No one can. It's not a knock on Geno. No one can overcome a defense that's playing this bad. So honestly, unless Geno's willing to take $28 million, something like that, or really I'll say 25 to 28 million, no more than 28. I don't think you can re-sign him. I don't think you can bring him back. I just don't think it's possible. Or I don't think it's wise. Because it'll be a short-term fix. It'll be a Band-Aid fix, right? But this is a strong quarterback class that is very deep. And it's flawed, right? No quarterback is a Joe Burrow or Trevor Lawrence type of prospect. But I really think that this team is built in every way for the future. And I think one of the cool things about Shane Waldron and his system is that you don't have to be the best quarterback in the league in order to thrive in the system. The system is fairly quarterback friendly. And if they can get a defense to help out a little bit, it'll be even more quarterback friendly. The system, the players, they're there. And so I'm not going to pretend like the Seahawks can take 5 years to rebuild this team. They're paying players to contribute to wins now, right? They're paying Jamal Adams. They're paying Quandre Diggs. Those players I just mentioned that they have to pay now, those players are key pieces, I think, to making sure that the Seahawks don't have an extended rebuild process. I think the Seahawks' best bet is to stick to the original plan. Yes, this was unforeseen. Yes, there's an opportunity here to get a quarterback now and just build that defense. But I just don't see Geno being the Super Bowl winning quarterback. I just don't. At some point, there's got to be a regression to the mean. Even if it's not this year, right? It sure was for Ryan Tannehill. Can the Seahawks really fix the defense in the next 2 years to make it a Super Bowl winning team? It's an awful lot of pressure. And it puts the Seahawks right where they were before, where, but you're paying Geno, right? You're paying him all this money. 2 years go by, you get him for 2-3 years, let's say. Let's say you make a deeper playoff run, but you don't win the Super Bowl. All right, well, now it's time to extend your 2 tackles. Now it's time to pay Tariq Woolen. And you're still, because Geno's contract is going to be up, you're going to need a quarterback. I think going all in on the short term to negate the long term in year 1 of a rebuild would be a mistake. It is so tempting, and I understand the temptation. And I'm not going to be mad if they decided to put the resources in that direction, but if I were them, I would stick to the process. No pain, no gain. Sometimes you just have to go through the process. Get the NFL ready quarterback. Get the Will Levis who knows how to work an offensive scheme, who really has worked this offensive scheme, who could thrive in it. He's not going to know defensive coverages the way that Geno does. He's not. There's no way. But also, hopefully, the defense is better and has more personnel that can help come in and contribute and help take some of the pressure off of Will Levis if that were to be who the Seahawks selected. Right now, based off Take-a-thon, the Seahawks have the number 10 and number 11th draft picks in the draft. As things stand right now, if the season were to end right now, their pick would be number 10 and the Broncos pick would be, that they now have, would be number 11. That's enough to get get one defensive player and get a quarterback. That's just the way to go. Because all of the scenarios I've thrown out with Geno completely negates the competition. Somebody's going to be willing to pay Geno what the Seahawks can't. The Bears, for crying out loud, have bucos, just tons of cap space. They could throw the book at Geno if they wanted to and give Justin Fields a little bit more time to develop, or decide to move on from him altogether, or give him a veteran presence. Whatever they wanted to do, they could do that. They got the space, they got the money to pay him. There are a lot of quarterback needy teams, and not everybody's going to feel confident they can get their guy in the draft. Somebody's going to want an insurance policy. Somebody's going to be willing to pay for an insurance policy, and then the Seahawks get into this bidding war. Stick to the process. It's what I say. Stick to the process. Let Geno get you as far as he's going to get you. People say it will be a loss if you let Geno walk. And it would be. I'm not pretending like it's not. And I'm not pretending like it's a huge risk either, because it is. Geno could go out and ball out for the next 5 years, and the Seahawks will look silly for letting him walk. But at the end of the day, you only have so much cap space. And this team isn't ready to win now. Going in on Geno is making a win now move. When the Titans went in on Ryan Tannehill, they already had much more. They were further ahead. They had a good defense. They had Derrick Henry. They had A.J. Brown. They were already really building towards something. They didn't have as many holes on their roster as the Seahawks have on theirs. That's the bottom line. Could it be a mistake? Yes. But I think the ultimate mistake would be paying Geno and hamstringing this franchise, both in the short, potentially in the short, but definitely in the long term. Think about it like this. When the initial trade for Russell Wilson went down, they were betting on themselves, John Snyder and Pete Carroll. They were saying, we can find another quarterback that can fit this system. And they may not be Russell Wilson, but they can be competent. They can do well. They will be able to grow in this offense. We've got enough offensive weapons around to be able to sustain pretty good play, to be able to build the roster back up and not pay a ton of money for a quarterback. That was a strategy. That was a thought process. They've proven that with Geno Smith. So why get stuck there? Why get stuck in that cycle? Keep that same mindset, right? Go on to the next. You don't need to pay all this money to the quarterback position. You can build the roster around the QB, especially with a quarterback friendly system, really. And it's not like Geno walks away with nothing. I think he has tremendously helped those tackles. So it's not like Geno walks for nothing. I don't know if another quarterback could help those tackles as much as Geno has by being, sometimes he can get, not step up in the pocket or from time to time. He has criticism from time to time, but he does a really good job of getting the ball out quickly and not putting too much pressure on the tackles and really helping them grow along with his style of play. And sure, sometimes he can throw it down deep, but I think his cadence in the pocket has helped them grow. It's helped the whole offense, I think, grow. Tyler Lockett has the most yards he's ever had through 5 games, for goodness sakes. And so if you can do it with Geno Smith, you can do it with the rookie quarterback, and you can do it, continue the cycle. It was a whole thought process. They didn't feel like they needed to throw a black hole of money into the quarterback position. They felt like they could get a good game manager quarterback and build the team around them and become Super Bowl champions the way that they were a Super Bowl champion in 2014. It'll really be interesting to see the narrative, how it continues to fold, how it continues to evolve, because I have a feeling the narrative won't stay. Geno will have a bad game, maybe a time or two, or maybe not have as good of a game, and maybe it'll be less of a discussion. But we'll continue to monitor that throughout the season. I think it will continue to be a hot topic amongst all Seahawks fans. But I do want to go back and do a little bit more game recap. Like I said, I didn't want to focus too much on it. I think it's a similar story. Good offense, terrible defense, calls not going the team's way, etc., etc. And there were some interesting storylines, but ultimately the Seahawks didn't win. They couldn't get it done against all odds. But there were some long-term repercussions as a result of that game, though, and that was the loss of Rashad Penny. Unfortunately, Rashad Penny suffered a broken fibula, and he is out for the season. That is a tragic loss for somebody who I think really needed a full year of putting together some real production. He is so talented. He has proven that he is talented at least, but he just cannot stay healthy. And it just seems like the guy's unlucky. I mean, the hit that he took, a lot of people could have got injured. The way that he fell and the way he kind of fell on, just unfortunate, really. It does make it potentially more likely that if Seattle wanted to bring him back, that they could, because I don't think he's going to get, much money in the market. The market won't be there for him because nobody's going to be willing to pay a running back a lot of money who can't stay healthy for more than 6 games. Unfortunately, that's a rough way to put it, but it has been his reality. And when he has been healthier longer, he hadn't been able to have the production. So that'll be something to watch, but he's out. It is an opportunity for the rookie, Ken Walker III, to really show up. And he is no Rashad Penny. That is obvious. But will he be able to keep the run game going? Right now, the Seahawks are number 1 in yards per carry, actually. And a lot of that has to do with the production of Rashad Penny. Will Ken Walker be able to produce similar production where the run game can continue to be productive and respected to really allow for some deep passes by Geno? I think the run really complemented the pass up, these past few weeks. The question is, will the run game still have some teeth to it? And can Rashad Penny carry the load? Will DJ Dallas be able to be a complementary secondary back, running back number 2? Hadn't seen a lot of good things from DJ Dallas to this point since the preseason. I'm curious if he will be able to step up as well in a time such as this, with Travis Homer still being on IR. Another loss was Al Woods, who got injured in the game, and it is questionable about if he will be able to return in the game on Sunday. That's something to monitor. He did not practice at Wednesday's practice. They said they plan to rest him for the next few days, see if he'll be ready to go on Sunday. That's a really big thing to watch because this defense doesn't have much going for it, but Tariq Woolen and Al Woods have been consistently great for this team. And even at his age, he is still 100% some of the engine running to allow anything productive to happen on defense. And he was missed in the second half of that game against the Saints. But, there were some hits. Gabe Jackson, he went out with an injury as well. Shelby Harris, he also did not practice Wednesday. So there's some key injuries to watch for in particular this week. We'll continue to monitor that for sure. But there are some positives that came out of this week so far as well. And that is that the Seahawks re-signed Bruce Irvin, a fan favorite. I know I am certainly excited about this signing. Bruce Irvin is exactly what this team needs. And I don't know how much production he's going to give the team, but my goodness, he can't be any worse. He can't be any worse than Darrell Taylor has been. He can't be any worse than Cody Barton has been. And I get the sense they plan on playing him more at the edge, letting him set the edge because he can competently do that in a way that Darrell Taylor has proven not to be able to do. He's going to allow for Uchenna Nwosu to be able to get a little bit more rest because he's quite frankly playing too much. Honestly, they could put him an inside linebacker and he'd be an upgrade over Cody Barton just because of the IQ alone. Cody Barton is still obviously struggling each game. But he's going to be a boost and really kind of teach these guys at a real young linebacker spot what it means to really play Seahawks defense. He's going to be a life and add some. They've already talked about his humor that he brings to the table. And they're going to need that. The defense maybe needs to have a little bit more fun. Maybe they're too serious. I don't know. Maybe they need to. They've been so serious. They is too focused and they're overthinking. I do see a lot of that, especially with Quandre Diggs, him trying to overcompensate for things. And maybe they could use a few laughs. Just to take things back and remember that it's still football at the end of the day. And maybe that can help bring some rallying of the troops, if you will, back to this defense. So that's exciting. I hope that he will get the opportunity to play. I know he hadn't really had a full week, but I don't care. I mean, really, like I said, this linebacker group needs some help. And I think Bruce Irvin can really provide a boost, even if not in production, just in morale and veteran presence. Maybe he can be to Darrell Taylor what Rashad Penny or what Adrian Peterson was to Rashad Penny, kind of unlock something in him, because for Taylor, half of it is effort. I just sometimes just don't see effort from him. And Bruce Irvin is always a hard worker, high motor guy. He's going to give you everything he's got. Maybe some of that can rub off on Taylor and sort of unlock him in at least that way. That'll be exciting to see. But another thing that I'm excited about is the opportunity to do Seahawks superlatives. They are back. We're bringing them back. As before, remember, all we do is go through, pay attention to some of the things that happened in the week before, and we evaluate where the Seahawks are and just do some fun superlatives around who did well, who didn't do well, that sort of thing. So my official Under the Radar award is going to go to Shelby Harris this week. Shelby Harris has been one of the better defensive linemen, or probably outside of Al Woods, the only other good defensive lineman. He's been able to provide some interior pressure. He's been good at sort of keeping the linebackers clean. And when he's not there, his presence, it's felt, just like with Al Woods. So I just wanted to give him, he's the most under the radar guy this week. I think nobody's really talking about what Shelby Harris brings or what he does. He's very easy to overlook, but I think he is a very important presence on a very weak defensive line. Most likely to get benched. I've been talking for a while about Gabe Jackson and Darrell Taylor. I'm not going to do it again because Darrell Taylor's already been benched and Gabe Jackson's been benched by injury. He's not exactly been benched, but this week, I think I want to highlight Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson is likely to get benched because Artie Burns is back, and he played a few snaps in that last game. And honestly, in those few snaps, he played slightly better. than Michael Jackson did. Michael Jackson did not have a bad game. PFF gives him a 64.4. So pretty average. But he did get beat still in coverage. Artie Burns, however, was able to grade out at a 69.5. He was actually the 5th best defensive player ranked on PFF. Artie Burns was only targeted once, but he didn't allow any receptions, which is a good starting place. Can't say that about any of the defenders when they first got targeted. They typically allow receptions. I just think he's got a little bit more to offer, and that extra bump, I think, will go far on a defense that has a lot of holes and can't afford a lot of errors and things like that. I really think that the extra boost that Artie Burns, I keep messing up this man's name, Artie Burns, can provide, the extra boost I think is needed, because here's the reality. We haven't talked about it yet, but Tariq Woolen is absolutely balling out. We're going to talk about him in a little bit. But because he's balling out, I just think quarterbacks are going to stop throwing his way, which means there's going to be everything is going to come by the way of Michael Jackson. And I don't think he can handle that. I really don't. I don't think he can handle being targeted at that rate without being a liability. They're going to throw at him because they feel like he's a liability. You need somebody who can really hold their own. I think you need somebody with a little bit more veteran savvy and starting experience. Artie Burns can be that. He really can. I believe that he can hold it down with Tariq Woolen not being targeted intentionally and not be a liability. At least that's my hope. So my thinking is that they really should start Artie Burns. Give him that shot. See what he can do alongside Tariq Woolen. They had a really good pairing last week. Ranked number 4, Tariq Woolen, and 5, Burns, respectively. See what that pairing can do. See if they can build on that momentum. Like I said, Artie didn't get a lot of snaps. He really didn't. But in his time, he made a big impact. And the defense needs as much of that as they can get. Too many holes to be filling at this point. They've got to get it under control. And you can only do that by playing the best talent. Play the best guy. Michael Jackson's not a rookie. He's not a draft pick. So you don't gain anything by starting him over Burns. They're both on 1-year deals. So he's my most likely to get benched on defense. On offense, most likely to get benched is Austin Blythe. This has not really been talked about a lot, but it is so worth talking about. He is rated by PFF as one of the worst centers in the league. The worst. Last I checked, the worst. He grades out at a 43.4 this season. That's his worst season by far. It's bad. And he's got some bright moments. He had one good game against Detroit that's sort of helping his average, but otherwise he's been a sub 40 player. And I know PFF isn't the end all be all, but it's probably one of the best ways to rate offensive linemen for sure. And it's been inconsistent. He's not been consistently strong in the run game, bad in the pass, not being consistently bad at the pass, but good at the run. He's been inconsistent in both. He's had games where he's been abysmal at the run game. He's had games but he's been better at pass protection. He's had games where he's been bad at pass protection, but he's been better at the run game. There's not even something you can depend on one way or the other to really say this guy's reliable. How do I know he's most likely to be benched? The staff decided to sign Joey Hunt to the practice squad. Joey Hunt. Undersized Joey Hunt. Joey Hunt's nipping at the guy's knees. Kyle Fuller isn't really any better. I don't understand why they even kept Kyle Fuller, but they did. If Joey Hunt is on this roster, Austin Blythe is in jeopardy. And he should be. I understand that. I think the thing he does best is communication, and that's probably what Kyle Fuller stinks at. But he is physically getting mauled. And he is repeatedly a liability in the interior of this game. And with Ken Walker, the third, he's a rookie. I don't think he'll have the savvy in terms of being able to overcome some of the deficiencies in the interior offensive line, the way that Penny did. I question his ability to do that. Rightfully so. He's a rookie. and it'll show. Can this team continue to have that much of a liability at center? I don't know, but he really is playing like one of the worst centers in this league, and something's got to shift at some point. So I'm calling out Austin Blythe today. Offense is most likely to get benched to this point. On a brighter note, let's talk about most likely to succeed. On defense, I want to shout out Ryan Neal. Ryan struggled in his first game that he got snapped, more regular snaps last week. But I think this week against the Saints was a lot better for him. He only allowed 29 yards. He had a 60% completion rating, which isn't great, but it's better than some of the other guys have been lately. I think I liked his tackling ability. I liked his aggression. He's not missing tackles out there, which is huge for this defense. And I think he'll be able to play a little bit better as he gets his legs under him more comfortable. He was also able to play in some of the 3 safety looks. I think he was able to provide a little bit there. He's able to blitz some. I think he's the guy. He played 100% of the snaps instead of Josh Jones, and I think that's the best way. Let Josh Jones come in and be a third safety, if you will, from time to time. That's the best role for him. You get the most out of your safeties that way, I think. And I think they'll continue to build on that. I saw some promising things from Ryan Neal in that regard. I think he's most likely to have, again, a couple things got away from him here and there, but I think, Ryan Neal will be able to be a good positive presence on that defense. And then on offense, of course, the obvious, I could go Ken Walker III, right? Like, he's the guy. He's going to be starting in his first game. He's most likely to, succeed. I'm going to go a different direction. I'm going to go with Phil Haynes, who came in to fill in for Gabe Jackson when he got injured. And Phil Haynes had the highest pass block rating, which is interesting because he was a guy who was more known as a run blocker, but he's really evolved as a pass blocker. He's still young. He's still got upside, and I think he gives you more in terms of upside in the run game. Gabe Jackson had a slightly higher PFF score with run blocking than he did, but man, I think he's younger. He's got upside, and then that was his first game, so I think he'll play even better. That 70-yard run that Ken Walker had was in large part, Phil Haynes was in for that. He was in for that play. He ran behind the hole that Phil Haynes blocked, and it wasn't just him alone, but I really think that 2-man game between Phil Haynes, I think he can upgrade this offensive line. I'm going to be frank. I've been very hard on Gabe Jackson, and I've been wanting to see him benched. I think Phil Haynes brings an upside and a youth and a talent physicality that has just been missing, especially in the run game. I think Ken Walker might be able to be successful because of the insertion of Phil Haynes into the lineup. So I think he is set up to succeed. He's not going to be a guy that people talk about. I don't think people will probably talk about Ken Walker, but mark my words, if Phil Haynes plays well, you're going to hear about it right here on Seahawks360, because I think that if Ken Walker succeeds, it's going to be in large part, probably, because Phil Haynes also succeeded. So let's move on to most improved, though. And on defense, I want to highlight Kobe Bryant, who is coming along pretty well. I think I see him getting better, and they're not a whole lot of stats to back that up right now. Not right now. PFF still gave him a 58.4, but that's much better than he's been graded before. He still allowed, he had 16 yards. He still allowed a touchdown. But that touchdown catch was, I understand why they counted it as a touchdown, but Kobe Bryant just did everything he could to break that up. And in the end, he ultimately did break it up. He was right there on that play. And I think 2 weeks ago, that's not something you see him there. I see maybe he's out of position, or he just, it leads to a busted coverage altogether. But I liked his ticky-tack play. He looks like he's getting more comfortable. I've been really worried about him being in the nickel spot because I do feel like he's playing out of position. I'm not sure he's a natural nickel, but just seeing him on the field, not allowing as many catches, not being as much of a liability, being a little bit more sticky in coverage, it's encouraging. And I think that ultimately, maybe this isn't hurting his growth. Maybe it is still helping him, even if he's not a natural nickel per se. And then on offense, I want to shout out Noah Fant as being the most improved. Noah Fant, he always came in as being talented, but I don't really feel like he showed himself as being, as a part of the Seahawks system. He hadn't been bad, but he hadn't really done anything to stand out. He lost he got on a lot of people's bad side in the preseason when he didn't make any effort to stay in bounds after Geno threw him a beautiful, beautiful pass. He's still been getting a lot of reps, but Will Dissly has been the clear, really, I think the better tight end all around up to this point. But Noah Fant had a really good game. He's pretty positive when it came to his pass blocking. He had 49 yards on 3 receptions, which means he averaged about 16 yards per catch, which is pretty good stuff. He was ranked a 73 overall on offense, and he was really able to provide this team with some good versatility, I thought. And then finally, the awards for the best all around goes first up to Tariq Woolen. Tariq Woolen has moved from most improved to best all around because this guy is dominant. I mean, he's playing at an all-pro level. Right now, he leads all corners in interceptions as he got his 3rd interception in a row last week. He graded his highest that he's graded to this point as a 73 on PFF. And he only allowed a 38.9 passer rating. The guy is really been dominant, and you can still see there's room for him to grow. You can see he's getting more comfortable. You can see he's adjusting his technique and small things like that. There's some things he could do to be even better, but just his sheer speed and his length allows for him to continually be a playmaker for this team. 66% completion. I mean, really, it's so comparable to Richard Sherman, and that makes it so exciting. It really does, because honestly, I'll be honest. I've been frustrated. I've been frustrated with the hype that Sauce Gardner has gotten, that Derek Stingley Jr. has gotten, and they haven't done anything compared to what Tariq Woolen has done on the field. He has continuously been a playmaker for his team, and that's not easy to do because he's got absolutely no pass rush to help him. And I mean no pass rush to help him. So for him to be doing the things that he's doing with so little experience, you could see it's so obvious. It pops out on film. If you look at his interception, he basically is running the route with the wide receiver. You can see his wide receiver background as he's running that route. He's basically running it himself. His fluidness, his ability to just turn his hips and get up and run, his ability to bait quarterbacks to make it look like the target be wide open, but his burst just allows for him to just have a quick recovery. He has been the absolute most fun part about watching this defense, and I would say he is officially the best defender on that field, even over Big Al Woods, who has been dominant in his own right. I can't talk enough about Tariq Woolen because he looks like second team All-Pro right now. He's got a strong case. I can only hope that he continues to make plays to get this national recognition because he deserves it. He deserves to be one of the few rookies in history to be nominated as All-Pro. Certainly Pro Bowl. So it's continued. This defense has had its struggles, but man, is Tariq Woolen absolutely the life of the defensive party. And then our offense, it's an old story to tell, but it can't be anybody else but Geno Smith. He is absolutely lighting it up week after week, continuing to exceed expectation. Geno Smith, I've already given you the statistics, just the things he's doing, the elite level that he's playing. He is absolutely the best offensive player all around on the Seattle Seahawks team. So anyway, guys, we got into a lot today. That's all I have for today. We're going to get you guys a preview to the upcoming Cardinals game very soon. So we'll talk a little bit more about that soon. In the meantime, be sure to follow me on Twitter at CandaceH901. That's CandaceH901. Be sure to follow the show, Ethos Seahawks, on Twitter. And if you're listening on YouTube, why don't you leave your comments? What are your thoughts on Tariq Woolen? Do you have any thoughts on Geno Smith? Would you extend him? How much would you pay him? We'd love to hear what you guys think. If you're listening to us on iTunes, be sure to give us a 5-star review. We always appreciate that. Helps us get our viewers up, support the show. In the meantime, that's it, guys. That's all I got. I'm out. And as always, go Hawks.